What seemed like love turned into loneliness. The first mask of protection can be the most deceptive, and in the end, I'll tell you the phrase I wished I had said. Dear daughter, it's nighttime, and the only light comes from the window, casting dancing shadows across the room. I'm here, pen in hand, because I want you to see how care can have sharp claws, hidden beneath a layer of affection. Back then, I was searching for security. Life felt like a dark maze, and any gesture of attention seemed like the exit. But what I didn't realize was that each act of love came with an invisible tether, pulling me into an increasingly restricted space. I was tired of fighting, tired of being strong. When he approached me and said he was concerned about me, my heart raced. What could be sweeter? And it was in that moment, in the dimness of casual conversation, that he revealed his little rule. It wasn't a direct command, but a request disguised as love. I just want to know where you are. That's all. That phrase sounded so light, like a gentle touch. But then, what appeared to be just a gesture of affection was, in reality, the first link of a chain to a prison I couldn't see. When he asked for those constant updates, I should have felt the weight of it, but the illusion of affection blinded me. That was when the messages started to become rehearsals for who I should be. Each response, a modification. Each doubt, an internal murmur. I didn't realize that care was transforming into possession, and I was sinking, without understanding. And I didn't notice that those small gestures, like flowers in a garden, were suffocating the roots of my freedom. As hours passed, I found myself feeling more and more isolated, feeling the weight of silence between us. Then came a day when, upon opening the door to the world outside, I noticed the shadow behind me. That love that seemed protective now revealed itself as a barrier. That love that seemed protective now revealed itself as a barrier. I had lost myself in a maze of empty promises and unspoken rules. Every step I took toward the outside world felt like scraping an open wound. There was fear, but also the thrum of a suppressed curiosity. What was out there? It was on a rainy afternoon, when the light filtered through heavy clouds, that everything started to crumble. He was sitting in one corner of the room, absorbed in his phone, while the silence echoed between us like a distant echo. It was as if a wall had risen between us, a space that once vibrated with laughter, now filled with a palpable tension. Deep within my being, a flame began to ignite. Something inside me screamed for freedom. With every message he sent, a part of me shrank. "You're not going out like that, are you?" he asked, with a voice that tried to sound light but felt as heavy as lead. And then I realized that love had transformed into something dark. It wasn't just control over my steps, but a subtle manipulation of my very being. That night, as the rain pattered on the roof, an idea emerged, a seed of rebellion, and I didn't know how to bring it to life. The chill surrounding me wasn't just the weather, but the loneliness that had settled into my soul. I went to the kitchen to prepare something warm, a ritual that always calmed me. As the water boiled, I looked out the window and saw the world outside. People coming and going, living their lives. A wave of sadness washed over me. Why not me? And I didn't realize that true love has no chains, no petty rules that suffocate the soul. Love should liberate, not imprison. But that doubt consumed me. Could I really be free? At that moment, he walked into the kitchen, his eyes analyzing every move I made. "What are you doing?" His voice carried a mix of concern and control. I hesitated, my gaze fixed on the kettle, where the water was beginning to boil. And then, I should have responded. I should have talked about how I felt trapped, how each of his questions sounded like a shackle. Instead, silence. It was in that silence that shadows danced. The pressure mounted. The unspoken words piled up like bricks, creating a wall between us. During those moments, I realized that keeping the peace was costing me more than I could bear. Days passed, but the atmosphere never lightened. I felt like a wilting plant that wasn't getting any light. More messages, more rules, more doubts. When he said he cared, the weight of guilt crushed me. "I just want what's best for you." It sounded sweet to the ears, but I knew it had a bitter taste. And I didn't realize that his concern, disguised as love, was turning into a need to control what I did, where I went. What could have been genuine care became a power struggle, a vicious cycle that kept me from living authentically. The nights were long, filled with insomnia and reflections. I began to notice the small signals my body was sending me. The knot in my stomach, the constant fatigue, the weight on my shoulders. It was in a moment of clarity that I realized I had a choice. The choice to fight for myself. I decided that I needed to speak up. The fear of his reaction was still there, but the desire to be free outweighed that paralysis. One day, looking out the window again, I saw a group of young people laughing, sharing spontaneous moments. My eyes filled with tears. I wanted this for myself. I wanted to feel the breeze on my face without worrying about what time I had to come back. I wanted to savor the sweet taste of life without the shackles of fear. And then, I took a deep breath. I decided that the next conversation wouldn't be about what I could do to please him, but about who I really was and what I truly wanted. The truth would be a sharp sword, but it was the only way to cut the chains that bound me. On that sunny morning, after a night of emotional turmoil, I knew I had to face the dragon that had become our relationship. With my heart racing, I braced myself to speak and tell the world that I was ready to live the life I deserved. So, I sat down at the table. He looked at me, and in that moment, my spirit prepared to finally be heard. The truth was about to burst forth, and I wouldn't look back. The truth was about to explode, and I wouldn't look back. Each beat of my heart echoed like a war drum, gearing me up for the confrontation that needed to happen. I knew the words that were about to come out could change everything. The atmosphere around us seemed to tighten, as if the world were pausing to listen. Before I could even open my mouth, he shot me a questioning look, curious, yet with a hint of doubt. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked, and I felt a knot in my stomach. That simple question, seemingly harmless at first, was like a dark whisper. It was a disguised invitation, almost as if he already knew which path I was about to take, and I moved forward. "I feel trapped." The phrase flowed out like a raging river, full of repressed emotions, of desperation and hope. He raised an eyebrow, his expression quickly shifting from curiosity to something more defensive, as if he was bracing for an attack. "What do you mean by that?" I continued, each word stronger than the last. "I feel like your care has turned into control. I can't even step outside for some fresh air without you asking where I am." The air grew heavy between us, and every syllable I uttered seemed to slice through the tension. He paused, processing. There was a vulnerability in his gaze, a glimpse of the person he could be. But there was also fear, a palpable dread of losing what he considered his, and in that moment, I didn't know how he would react. His next response could be the key to my freedom, or the end of any hope for reconciliation. "I just want to protect you," he replied, but the phrase sounded hollow, echoing like a lifeless cave. Protection? Was that the word he used to justify his control? Anger began to rise within me. Protection isn't possession, and care shouldn't come with rules. I didn't recognize the woman speaking so clearly, but I felt that this was the only version of myself capable of fighting. The conversation continued, like a game of chess where each move could lead to defeat or victory. He tried to argue, attempting to convince me that his intentions were good, but I knew that intentions didn't matter when they resulted in pain. He couldn't understand the wound that had already taken root, the way each imposed rule undermined my self-confidence. And then, in that moment of frustration, the confusion began to dissipate. "You don't understand," I said, my eyes burning. "True love has no chains. I can't live like this." His expression changed, shifting from a closed demeanor to a tentative openness. Doubt lingered, a constant internal struggle. There was a part of him that wanted to understand, but another part clung to control. And then, realizing he was moving in his own prison, a new idea emerged in my mind. It was time to be clear. The relationship we had wasn't love. It was a disguised struggle, a vicious cycle that imprisoned us in a pattern of control and submission, where neither of us was winning. I needed to show him that love should be light, not a burden. The words that flowed from me were more than just a statement. They were a summons for both of us to seek the truth. So, I took a deep breath and released my final emotional load. "I can't do this anymore. I can't ignore the pain I feel. If you really care about me, you'll have to let me go." The silence that followed was electrifying. Each word hung in the air, weighing on us like a storm about to break. He looked at me, and for the first time, I felt he was actually seeing me. Not the woman he wanted to mold, but the woman I truly was. However, that moment of clarity required courage from both of us. Change wouldn't be easy, and I knew that even if we decided to take different paths, there would be no guarantees of immediate peace. The fear of being alone was still there, but I realized that the real fear was remaining tied to a life that wasn't mine. And in that space of uncertainty, a wave of determination washed over me. I needed to move forward, regardless of what that meant for both of us. And then, I understood that love should be about growth, about blooming together in the light, not hiding in the shadows. This was the phrase I wanted to say from the very beginning, the message that needed to echo throughout our entire conversation. I choose to be free, and I hope you find your own freedom too. He fell silent, absorbing every word, and in that moment, a new possibility began to surface. I didn't know what awaited us. In fact, I didn't need to know. What mattered was that finally, I was ready to live the life I deserved, free from the chains that had suffocated me for so long. He remained silent, absorbing every word. The tension between us was palpable, like a taut string ready to snap. There was a new space there, a void that could be filled in a different way, a new perspective emerging on the murky horizon of our hearts. In that moment, I realized we weren't just two people in that room. There was a reflection of what we could be, of the potential that slipped away between the rules and limits. But fear was still present. I felt its presence like a shadow, a constant reminder of what was easier, following the instructions, keeping the peace at the cost of my own identity. And I couldn't help but wonder, was I really ready to be free? The idea of freedom always sounded so sweet, but now it was tinged with the bitter taste of uncertainty. I looked at him, waiting for the answer that could open or close the door to our relationship. He seemed to be struggling with himself, confusion etched on his face. Somewhere inside him, there was a spark of understanding, but the resistance to what was unfolding was strong. What if you decide to leave and regret it? The question slipped from his lips like a fearful whisper, a resonance of the insecurities we both shared. I might regret it, I responded without hesitation, but I can also discover who I am outside these walls. As I spoke, I felt the growing strength within me. This conversation was about more than just us. It was about the woman who was rising from the ashes, the woman who had waited so long to break free. The weight I carried in my stomach began to dissipate, as if each syllable I uttered was clearing the polluted air that surrounded us. Do you really think taking care of yourself is keeping me trapped? He seemed perplexed, as if trying to connect the dots between what he thought and how he truly felt. That's exactly what you're doing, and that's not love. My words were sharp, but necessary. Love shouldn't come filled with distrust. I wanted him to understand, and maybe even wish that one day he could see beyond himself. In that moment, I saw something change in his expression, a crack in the bravado. For every control he tried to implement, there was a seed of doubt germinating, an internal struggle between the need to keep the reins and the desire to free what could be. A glimpse of vulnerability crossed his gaze, and I knew he was starting to see the strange irony of our relationship. His eyes filled with tears when he finally spoke. I just don't want to lose you. The pain in his voice was palpable. The fear of loss seeped through his words, and it hit me with unexpected force. I offered him a fragile smile, feeling compassion emerge from a deep place within me. It was a new feeling, as before I only saw his pain as a reflection of my own. You won't lose me if you let me be who I am. And if that means we need to separate, I need to believe that you'll find your own way back to yourself. The sadness I felt for him was heavy, but not overwhelming. It was a sadness that came with hope. He wasn't just controlling, he was also a lost man, seeking meaning through his own fears disguised as love. I don't know how to do this, he murmured, the fragility exposed in the lines of his face. I filled that silence with a deep understanding. No one knows. That's how we learn. We'll make mistakes and learn together, but in this process, we have to allow love to exist in different ways. As we spoke, the storm from the previous night seemed to be receding, leaving behind a clearer sky. I realized that truth had a weight, but also a lightness. The conversation was shaping us, creating a new future that was not entirely defined. There was a possibility for repair and growth, but only if we were both willing to give ground. Somehow, what had seemed like a stalemate now appeared to be an opportunity, a chance to rebuild, to re-examine the ties that many might consider unbreakable. Yet, The feeling of being seen, of being heard, was powerful. It was the first time in a long while that I felt I had an active role in my own narrative. I choose to live, and I hope you choose to do the same, I said firmly. The morning light filtered through the window, illuminating the shadows that had previously dominated that space. That day, we didn't know what our fate would be, but the battle fought there made us stronger, more aware of our own desires and fears. The dialogue would continue, and with it, a new chapter would unfold. But one thing was clear. Freedom began with the acceptance that each of us deserved a real chance to live fully.